Hello everyone from Ukraine. You're watching Channel 24. My name is Andriy Drozda. And our guest today is Mr. Markus Faber, German politician and a member of Bundestag from the Free Democratic Party. Mr. Faber, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So we are recording our conversation at the same time and the same day when the Rammstein meeting still goes on in Germany. What do you personally expect from this event?
I do expect the German government to give export permit to, let's say, Poland, Finland, for instance. And I furthermore expect them to also take part in the support of Ukraine when it comes to combat tanks and deliver Leopard 1 and 2.
Okay, and how can this position of the German government for providing Leopards tanks to Ukraine can change? Because previously we could hear the position of Chancellor Sholtz. He was negotiating with the President of the United States and told to Joseph Biden that the Abrams tanks from the United States should be first, and then Germany will make a next step.
Basically, that's not really what Olaf Scholz said. He said we are in this together, and there should be a common approach of NATO towards when it comes to delivering battle tanks to Ukraine. So actually, the German position is that we should not go on alone. But if everybody is going on like Finland, Poland, UK, France, I think Germany should also not be left alone. So we should go together with our partners. And I think this is where Germany is heading right now. Of course, we have had some personal affairs as well, as we have a new defense minister by yesterday. So there are quite some changes right now.
We will definitely talk about the new defense minister of Germany and about his probable future effectiveness and his work on the position. But just yesterday, the Bundestag failed to vote on the supply of the deliverance of Leopard tanks to Ukraine. What was the problem with this voting? Why is there still not enough support in the German parliament for sending these tanks to Ukraine?
There is enough support in the German government and also in the German parliament, I guess. The point is we have voted on delivery of heavy weaponry to Ukraine last year as well. And the normal procedure in the German Bundestag is to present such a vote to the floor, to the plenary hall, then have it discussed in the committee, and then have it back in the hall and have a vote. So yesterday we had the first hearing about it. Now we will go with it to the committee, Foreign Affairs Committee and Defense Committee, which I'm a member of, and then we will have it discussed in the plenary hall and have a vote on it. So the problem of majority in the parliament actually does not really exist, as the Conservatives, the Liberals, and also the Green Party are supporting it, and we are still working on the support of the Social Democrats, but hopefully this issue will be gone by tomorrow.
What kind of German political parties and forces are strictly against of helping Ukraine and giving any weaponry to Ukraine, armored vehicles and tanks especially?
We have two parties in the German Bundestag that are strictly against supporting Ukraine. It's the far left, it's the former Socialist Party, and it's the far right, the Alternative for Germany. They are both with Putin and they're both against supporting Ukraine. So, but altogether they have 15% of seats in the German parliament, so more than 80% are in favor of supporting Ukraine. The question is, what's the right timing? The question is, how much battle tanks are the right amount? The question is, how can we make this combined approach together with our partners?
So there are no reasons to say that Chancellor Sholtz and other German politicians are really afraid that the transfer of German tanks to Ukraine would lead to some kind of escalation from Russia. Is it a false narrative?
I think it's a false narrative, but this narrative works too good in Germany, actually, because Germany has a very pacifist approach for decades now, since the Second World War. So to change this perspective of German politics, this is the point right now. And it's also, I think, of a question of generations of parliamentarians, of politicians. We are trying to change the perspective. We're trying to convince people over here that not everything can be discussed if somebody is attacking you with arms. It is a full-scale invasion, and obviously Ukraine needs a means to defend itself. And yeah, we are working on that issue here.
And how would you basically generally describe the difference between different generations of German politicians and in society? Are the younger people in Germany really see the things and the situation differently from their parents and grandparents?
I think, at least when it comes to the politicians, I think my generation, I'm 38 years old, and politicians younger than me have the perspective of German unification, and have also the perspective of Germany as a Western country, and France, Great Britain, and others as allies of us, and that this democracy has to be defended also against dictatorships from abroad. When you ask older politicians, they have a perspective of Germany being a frontline state, Germany being divided, having Russian troops in Germany, so they tend to be much more cautious about the issue, because I think their political education comes from a time that is not really in fact anymore, but is still in their minds somehow.
Let's talk a little bit about the German society. What is the opinion of German citizens in different parts of the country regarding the provision, the transition of tanks to Ukraine? Has the support of Ukraine in general increased in German society over this more than 10 years of full-scale war?
The support, I guess, has increased over the last year. So from February to, let's say, June, July, something like that, it has increased up to 80%. And right now, the question is how you ask the question. If you ask, should Germany deliver military aid to Ukraine? 75% of the people say, yes, we should. If you ask, should we provide heavy battle tanks to Ukraine? It's half and half. And people in Western Germany say, in the majority, yes, we should support Ukraine with heavy battle tanks. And people in Eastern Germany, where I come from, the part of Germany that was part of the socialist, the Soviet system, say in the majority, no, we should not. So Germany is partly divided on that when it comes to heavy battle tanks.
Okay. And how did the position of the government and political elites were changing from the refusal to give Ukraine any little weaponry, any weapons, to the readiness to give armored vehicles such as mortars and other ones, and possibly even tanks? We will wait for the decision today or in near future. What were the reasons for that shift, for that change?
I think Germany had a big learning curve last year. As I mentioned, we have a very pacifist approach for decades, and to see an actual war, conventional war on this scale back in Europe was something very new to the German public and also to the German politics. So as you remember, our former defense minister started with 5,000 helmets. And nowadays, obviously, we delivered 100,000 of hand grenades, ammunition, Panzer howitzers, Leopard tanks, and so on, Mars 2 rocket launcher. The Marder infantry support vehicle will be delivered. So there was a big learning curve, and this learning curve has to continue. That's why we as the Liberals and the German Bundestag pressure so hard for battle tanks for Ukraine.
And we are very thankful for that help, for that support. We really can feel and see it in Ukraine, especially anti-craft defense units such as Leopards, you mentioned, Iris-T and other systems. They are very useful and needed in Ukraine. So what was the reason for Christine Lambert dismissal from the position of the Minister of Defense in Germany? And will the new Minister of Defense, Boris Pistorius, be more effective in this position?
I think Ms. Lambrecht was made defense minister in different times. In 2021, when, at least from the German perspective, Germany was at peace and Europe was mostly at peace as well. There was a threat, but was at peace. So her approach was to reform our procurement within our armed forces, to have like management skills and reform and modernize our forces. She was Minister of Justice before, so it was basically about how to lead the Ministry of Defense. And right now, I think there's a different approach within the Social Democratic Party, and that approach is that there is a landslide change of perspective. We have a war within Europe. We have a big problem, and Germany should be a part of the solution. And I guess that's why Boris Pistorius, who has been a former Minister of Interior in the state of Lower Saxony, is now the German Defense Minister. And he hopefully will take the way to support Ukraine, to support it even more, and also with Leopard 2.
Do you think that Germany did enough and in time and make those steps in time to support Ukraine, or something more had to be done or should have been done through this 10 months of war? Because, you know, Ukrainian political leaders, starting from President Zelensky, always, you know, ask and urge to make Western countries faster, quicker steps to support Ukraine more, because we are reacting over the Russian escalation. We are not keeping the initiative in our hands. So could Germany do something more and support Ukraine in a more, you know, proper way through this 10 months of war?
Yes, we should have started earlier. For instance, I started in November 2021 to try to convince my coalition partners, because then I came back from the Parliamentary Assembly of NATO in Washington, and all of my colleagues from other NATO countries said, okay, they assume this could happen this winter. So I said to my coalition partners, we should do what the Baltics, what Poland is doing, what the British are doing, and we should support Ukraine right now. There was no way convincing them. And I said, okay, what do we need to convince you? And they said, okay, if there's a war, we can talk again. And that's what we did. Obviously, even after the full-scale invasion started, we had been too slow, and it was basically too little too late. But I think there's a learning curve. There's a learning curve on ammunition. There's a learning curve on artillery and tanks. And it has to continue. But I hope you also see the advances and improvements we have made here.
Yeah, we definitely see that. We definitely see some positive signs of a shift in the mind and the vision of German politicians and other countries' actually behavior. You recently visited Ukraine and even went to the frontline city of Bakhmut. Why did you decide to go so close to the battlefield? You also were in Odessa and in other cities. So what are your impressions after this visit to Ukraine?
I visited Ukraine for the first time in August last year. And in August last year, I've been to Kiev, but also to Kharkiv and in the Donbas region. And the situation was very different then than it was now. And for me, the aim of my trip in January was first to deliver some help to the people actually living there, people that are actually fighting there. So on the Orthodox Christmas, I wanted to provide some help. I brought GPS navigation system with me, provided them to the Ukrainian airborne assault troops, to the battalion commanders, but I also brought and tried to bring power banks and flashlights and so on with me. So this was one point, but the most important point is to get informed about the humanitarian situation, to get informed about the military situation, and to bring this information back here to Germany, back to the German parliament, and to inform my colleagues what the situation really is and why Ukraine is in such need for heavy battle tanks, for artillery system, for ammunition, for air defense, and for so much more. So this time, after going to Kiev and Kharkiv, I went to the tank brigade at Kupiansk, and from there on to Lyman, to the mass graves close to Lyman, had a look at the city, how it is demolished and destroyed. And via Kramatorsk, I also went to Zaporizhia and the villages south of Zaporizhia, and then on to Kherson. I've been to torture prison in Kherson, talked to one of the 460 people that had been tortured there, former Ukrainian policeman. He described me very much in detail how he was tortured over weeks, not just by hitting him, but also by sending electricity shocks through his body. They had these electrodes on his earlobes, but also on his testicles. And luckily we were able to leave this torture prison because Ukraine had freed Kherson with battle tanks that is in need so much now. And I also visited, for instance, the children's hospital in Kherson that was shelled over the change of the years, and also a day after I was there. So yes, it is quite some experience. I had done there for some days, but I also try to explain to people that in Germany, that normal citizens are living there for months and months and months and suffering so much. Also in Kherson has like 70,000 people right now. And I'm trying to explain them that how the situation is and that they do need help. This is not a normal situation in Europe, but this is a very devastating situation.
And after the full-scale invasion, Russian invasion into Ukraine, millions of people had to flee, had to run away from the country, and many of them are now displaced persons in other European countries. Some of them stayed in Germany, actually. Is it this issue of the displaced persons, of the people who are refugees right now, significant, I don't know, tangible in the German society right now? Do you feel it? How would you just work with this issue in the future?
It is an issue in the German society. I've talked to refugees from Ukraine, basically women with children that came from Ukraine to my hometown, the city of Stendal as well. And it is an issue within the German society, but it's not a problem. I think for most Germans, those refugees, they are really welcome because we know refugees are fleeing from war. And also it's mostly women and children because, of course, men are fighting in Ukraine. And so this makes people in Germany understand the situation, the necessity for help much easier. So fortunately, there's no disconsent or some kind of problemizing it, even by political extremists, but there's very broad support for refugees from Ukraine.
And we are also thankful for this help from Germany to our people who are now staying there in your country. That's the very important step and important support. And how did the war in Ukraine affect actually the attitude of the Germans towards Russia? How was Russia perceived in Germany before the war, and how our Germans actually treat this country right now?
This also differs if it comes to Western and Eastern Germany. This is so the former socialist republic in Western Germany. So from the perspective of Western Germany, Russia is just one country among others, and was a former superpower, of course, but obviously right now it's not performing very well if it comes to economics. It has become more and more dictatorship and basically relies on military strength right now. This is basically the Western perspective, and this military strength goes away now on a daily basis as the Ukrainians are fighting so bravely. This is basically the Western perspective. From the perspective of Eastern Germany, we had Soviet troops in our cities for decades. The flat of my parents was 500 meters away from a Soviet barrack, and I think the Eastern Germans were very happy when all these troops left in the 90s, and obviously they don't want them back. So if it comes to Russia, from the perspective of Eastern Germany, there's still a lot of more like respect, maybe even fear, and not too much understanding that Russia really has changed over these decades, and maybe the Soviet Union that they remember from the 80s is not the Russia terrorist state that we see right now in 2023.
Got it. So there is a difference between different regions, Eastern and Western Germany. And how tangible and strong was, Russian influence on some German politicians and society? I mean, the big money that Moscow spent on its agents of influence, on its propaganda in different various European countries. Did Germany overcome this Russian interference and intervention into informational, sphere and society?
I think we still try to overcome it. Like we have blocked Russia Today after the Deutsche Welle, the German broadcasting channel, was blocked in Russia. So it's basically a tit-for-tat approach. And then to the first part of your question, there still is influence if it goes to YouTube, for instance, or to other social media channels. Obviously, Russia is very active in trying to send disinformation via those channels. And I don't have data on how Russia actually tried to influence German politicians. But from what is obvious, it's mostly spread within former active politicians within the Social Democratic parties, such as Gerhard Schröder, who is working today for a Russian oligarch, basically for the Russian state. But this is hopefully not too common among German politicians.
Got it. So probably the final question about the forecast, about the future. How will your point of view, your vision, how will the war in Ukraine affect the future of Europe and the Western world, and how will this war in Ukraine actually end?
I think is it affecting the Western world in a way that the outcome will affect the decades to come. If Russia would be successful, all countries in Europe would be in danger, especially the smaller countries, especially the countries that have a common border with Russia, such as Estonia, Latvia, and so on. So they would be really scared, and they would drastically raise their expenditure on military expenditure. So that would weaken the security architecture in Europe. This should not happen. So Ukraine is obviously not just fighting for themselves, but also for all of Europe, and that's why we should also support them, not just on a moral issues, but also because it's for our own good. How will it end? I think it's a best case scenario that in spring Russian mobilized troops try to advance and are blocked. That would be a good thing, and then hopefully Ukraine can continue doing what they did last summer, last autumn, freeing their own territory, putting military pressure on the Putin regime, and in this way trying to force them to withdraw the invading troops and to get terms with Ukraine that are very favorable for Ukraine. This is the best case scenario by autumn this year, but it's not a scenario I would expect. I unfortunately expect this war to continue until the pressure within the Russian society will be so high that hopefully this dictatorship in Russia will fail.
Got it. Thank you so much, Mr. Faber. It was a pleasure and honor for me to talk to you today, and thank you for such a great conversation and for your personal position and consistent work and support of Ukraine. Thank you once more.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you, our dear audience. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Markus Faber, and I hope to see you soon on our channel. Bye-bye.